All right, so I'm really happy to introduce Erika de Castro, who's our first speaker. She's an urban planner and community development expert involved in international projects. And specifically, she led a project focused on metropolitan governance, gender equity, and violence against women in Brazil. And she is with the Center for Human Settlements, and she was the manager of this project, which is called New Public Consortia for Metropolitan Governance in Brazil. So here's Erika.
Thank you very much for, I feel honored to have this opportunity to talk about safer cities and discuss with you all the potential activities that could be improving our cities in terms of gender violence. The first thing I would like to do is to start this presentation with a question. How should be a city that cares for women and girls? In order to respond to these questions, we must first have a brief definition of what is really violence against women. Violence against women is not new in human history, it's part of the social history of humankind, where women is considered a lower individual and where in a patriarchal society, men are superior. Prejudice, discrimination, and intolerance against women have been fostering gender violence, which intertwines sex and gender, race and ethnicity, and social class. This kind of violence is shown in behaviors and social constructs by which women who have been oppressed through centuries, because there are stereotypes, there are beliefs, values, and attitudes that became natural, transmitted from generation to generation without any questioning. Violence against women is not only acts of aggression against a woman's body, like sexual abuse, beating, or physical and psychological torture. The violence that women suffers happens in the day-to-day experience, incorporated and rooted in the veiled, masked, in our everyday language through words with double meaning, slangs, expressions, and even derogatory ways of addressing professions that are mainly occupied by women. It's part of the social imaginary of our collective society that legitimizes the subordination to male power. It's clearly displayed in the lack of accessibility, adequacy, and safety of the urban environment, and especially in public places. Now, where this violence mostly happens? It mostly happens in cities, big and small. Thus, the importance of us discussing the scenario where this open and veiled violence against women and girls are happening. Globalization has meant that society has become more urbanized and complex. Urbanization has brought good opportunities to improve jobs, services for poor people. However, this is not necessarily a good thing. The speed and scale of globalization and its association with the extreme poverty and violence are overwhelming. Over half of the population today lives in cities, and in the next 50 years, the proportion is going to be 2/3. Canada, for example, has already 82% of people living in cities. So it's a tendency, a trend that cannot be avoided. Urban agglomeration, especially metropolis and megacities, make people feel anonymous, more vulnerable, and paradoxically more aggressive, less punishable, and less responsible for their surrounding environments. And all these are good conditions to increase violence. Higher numbers of violence behaviors, especially towards women and girls, are occurring by minute. Poverty, especially urban poverty, has been increasing, and statistics show that women are overrepresented overrepresented in the poor population, with 70% of the 2 billion poor people in the world are women. A report from 2011 from the World Bank stressed that there is a strong link between poverty and violence. And the direct costs are death, injury, and the indirect cost is psychological trauma, displacement, generalized insecurity, and reduced income. A sense of fear is taking hold of humankind. Although fear is invisible, it is something very real and affects almost everybody, even if people don't necessarily realize it. Urban violence, sexual harassment, rape, domestic violence are strong components of this generalized fear, and all of them are realities that women face the most. According to the World Health Report, each year at least 1 million people worldwide die violent death, and a quarter of them, around 400,000, are women victims of femicide, women murdered just because they are women. Many urban places that were considered safe are now viewed as a safety threat. Playgrounds, schools, shops, parks now are considered many times hazardous places where crimes occur. Even social actors that are supposed to protect us, like police, are now in many cities corrupted, abusing power, so they are part of the urban fear. Statistics from 2012 show that this fear has arisen. In Russia, approximately 4 women are killed each day. 3 women in Colombia, 2 women in Brazil, 2 women in Venezuela, 1 woman in the USA. In Canada, the stats from '98 showed that there were 1 to 2 women killed by week, meaning around 100 women per year killed just because they are women. All these stats are showing increased levels of violence against women, and probably they are lower than the real ones because poor women, women from minorities, some of these disenfranchised women are not represented in these numbers because of cultural barriers, because of incompetence of the police or inefficiency, and other factors. Undoubtedly, humankind is living in a climate of fear, but women and girls are usually the most affected, not only through the violence direct, but through the fear of violence. So let's talk about what constitutes a safer city and inclusive for women and girls. Okay, so the idea is that in order to be a safer city, it has to be considered a right to the city for women and girls. This has to be the foundation towards building an inclusive and safer city. Otherwise, it won't work. They have to feel they are full citizens. The public spaces have to be intensively used and safely used, especially for women and girls. So some urban features can well help in the sense of less fear and comfort and trust. So some of the key points have to be identified in order for us to concretely address factors that are directly and indirectly involved in the making of these violent manifestations. So I'm going to talk briefly about characteristics, strategies that could help us in building the scenario of a better city. One is public awareness, the other is public and civic engagement and capacity building. Because when we are creating a safer city, we are talking about various actors, institutions, and organizations, because the planning and design per se of the cities is not enough. is it is an integrated link between policies from education, health, to urban design. So, but for the sake of the theme of this, session, I would mention that planning design is a key because they could include good illumination and landscaping, wide-ranging visibility, pedestrian and bike routes, comfortable urban furniture, clear and visible signs, proximity of emergency services. All these are parts of what would be a safer city. This has to be dealt not only through the will of women organizations. This has to be dealt with the background of public policies. And here we faced with a difficulty. What is the level of government who should deal with this? Coming from Brazil, where cities are an independent creature recognized in the Constitution, this is slightly different from Canada. But over there, what we work with is how the city can effectively work and deliver services for helping women. And in particular, I would like to point an example of a work that we did over there, that where in Belo Horizonte, a metropolitan city in Brazil with 4 million people, we created a consortium of municipalities who decided to work together towards diminishing violence against women and dealing with the victims. So, and they were disparaging. There was 1 million people in one city, 500,000 in another. So it's not that they come together in one packaged common pattern. But they sat down and decided this is where their responsibility as a regional entity, because the perpetrators, the victims, they are not necessarily in the same municipality. So you do have to have some kind of agreement in order to deal both with the perpetrator and with the victims. You have to have safe houses to attend. You have to have services that are improving the way women are seen. For example, programs of non-sexist in education. Imagine New Westminster has a good program in the schools for non-sexist education, and here in Vancouver we don't. So the boys over there and girls are better trained, are far more aware of the problem of gender violence than our kids here. So this is why I think one of the good things that could happen in terms of policies is that we could work together within municipalities. The other good advantage of having this entity is that these entities contribute compulsory towards a fixed budget that deals with the problem. So we don't depend on grants or eventually changes or whatever. So the municipalities have a contract between themselves that they are going to provide the money for these activities, that training the police, doing all these programs of non-sexist education, deal with safe houses, deal with transition houses, and overall linking, even training the legislative chambers. Someone was saying...
Let me just do a time check.
Okay.
First off, this is her second language.
Yeah.
So would you be willing to give her 2 or 3 more minutes? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're doing fabulous.
Yeah, well, I know that is my passion, so I can go on, and I have to be controlled. But coming back to this idea is that I think it's feasible in Canada, even within a very different political framework and with very different circumstances where power is divided and so on. The other point is that further the level of government are from the women, less responsible they are. So, well, it's not that I don't think that that should be a national framework. Yes, I think that should be a national framework. But really, the work has to be done in the municipalities because it's where the women and girls live, and that is where we can understand their problems and their fears. So, quickly, I'm going to introduce what I thought could be, for your judgment, some points that could be either discussed here and followed up for in the next session, the plenary. So my suggestions would be that we could, in this conference, in a very pragmatic way, to address, one, design a program for human and youth organizations to work together with neighboring municipalities, engaging universities and other related entities to gather and compile the best data possible to safety, related to safety in each community or neighborhood. Everybody knows that all these numbers are complicated, and when I was investigating about Canada, it's worse than anything else, because Stats Canada has been changing the way they gather data, and this is crazy, because in truth, you don't have a clear portrait of what is happening. So I think this is, okay, second, I just read now. Second, continue with the Women Transforming Cities cafes, creating a permanent program of cafes. Redesign the events for neighborhood and communities to discuss their needs and priorities. In particular, let's create a series of creating safer cities for women in cafes in several places, maybe 2 cities in each province as a pilot or something like that. Through community mapping, surveys, videotaping, recording interviews, we start to build up data that are realistic and really represent what the women and girls feel. 3, promote a municipal program for 2 years at least in order to create a city map of violence against women. This could be done from a collection when we engage all high schools in the city to do it. So, and then we put together this city map of violence. And this would to have at least 2 benefits. One is to increase the awareness and stimulate the discussion between young men and women about what it is, violence against women. When they are doing something they know would be recognized, would be shown in the municipal hall, and so on and so forth. Of course, this map has to be done many times, but that is part of the process. 4th point, create a data bank of safety community maps with quarterly interviews, oral histories within each surveyed community. 5th, promote surveys to define 3 priorities for each community to increase safety in their surrounding. But in terms of actions, defining, designing costs in short and medium-term programs. For example, education, sensitization of the police, and other key institutions that are engaged with women and girls. Again, defining design and costs. And the 6th, that is the most important, offer this information clearly to municipal hall in a way they can include in the next budget, be it 2014, 2015, but they do have a concrete piece of our work to put in their budget. Right. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for